Countries also sometimes make mistakes. Like here in Uganda. Uganda was moving very well.
President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni insists that it was wrong for former Ugandan president, other than Amin Dada, chasing away Asians. Remember, in 1960s, during Amin Dada's regime, he gave 90 days for Asians to leave Uganda. Asians had built almost the empire in the business sector, and they were responsible for almost 90% of Uganda's economy. So when Idi Amin Dada saw this, and he was like, how? So he decided to chase them away so that Ugandans can occupy the economy and build their own country. Listen, this was during the NAM summit where Museveni was addressing these delegates from almost 129 countries who had gathered in Uganda to talk about a lot of issues regarding this summit, the non-aligned movement, the body that governs almost 129 countries that bring them together. These countries, the non-aligned movement countries, those are countries that are not in support of the American or the Soviet Union, which is Russia. First, look at Museveni's submission on this issue. Then I come back, I tell you the reasons why Idi Amin Dada had to chase away Asians in Uganda.
NAM countries also sometimes make mistakes. Like here in Uganda. Uganda was moving very well in the 1960s. Then we had a man called Idi Amin. I don't know whether you heard of him. He was a soldier, a British soldier, poor, no education. He came and took over the government. We decided to fight him. But in a very short time, he expelled our Asians. There were Asian people who had come from Asia and settled here, especially India, Pakistan. This property here, this is a joint venture between the government and one of those people, one of our Indian origin people. Idi Amin expelled all this, and yet they were a very active investment group. They were in sugar, they were in hotels, they were in steel production. So here you had a leader of a NAM country undermining his own economy. So therefore, it is very crucial that we study very carefully the issue of the investment climate in our respective countries. When we kicked out all these people and we came into government, we brought back, we gave back the properties of our Asian citizens and non-citizens that Idi Amin had taken. We gave them back. We had a hot debate in Parliament. Some people saying this, some other. We said no, they must get back their properties, and they got their properties. And this one here is one of those people who came back as soon as he heard that we had given him. He came back he was in London. He came back here.
Idi Amin Dada was a military officer and a politician who served as the third president of Uganda from 1971 to 1979. So he ruled Uganda for 8 years before he was overthrown by the guerrilla warlords. He ruled as a military dictator and is considered to be one of the most brutal despots in the history of Uganda. President Idi Amin Dada came to be known as the butcher of Uganda for his brutality, and it is believed that some 3,000 300,000 people were killed and countless others tortured during his regime. Why did Ugandan Asians have to migrate? Here, ex-President Idi Amin Dada accused the minority of Asians for being disloyal and also sabotaging Uganda's economy and encouraging corruption. These claims have been disputed on numerous occasions by Indian leaders. He also defended the expulsion by arguing he was giving Uganda back to ethnic Ugandans. The British, having brought Indians to the region, had invested in education of Asian minority during colonial time in preference to the indigenous Ugandans. I'm giving reason why Idi Amin Dada had to chase away Asians. These are Indians and Pakistanis in Uganda. By the early 1970s, many Indians in Southeast Africa and Uganda were employed in the sartorial and banking business, and Indophobia was already ingrained by the start of President Amin's rule in 1971. While not all Ugandan Asians were well off, they were on the average better off than the indigenous community of Uganda. They constituted 1% of the population while earning a fifth of the national income. Imagine foreigners controlling your economy. Almost 90% of the businesses that were in Uganda by that time were controlled by Asians. This is one of the reasons why Idi Amin Dada had to chase them away from Uganda. Military dictator Amin had taken control of Uganda under a coup in 1971, dethroning the once Prime Minister of Uganda, and that is Obote. After this, he carried out a census of Asians in Uganda and publicly accused them of economic misconduct and ethnic insurality. In 1972, Amin expelled all Asians from Uganda and seized their property. In response, Britain agreed to allow the entry of all those refugees that it could not persuade other countries to accept. What happened in 1972 in Uganda when Asians were expelled? August 4th, 1972, Amin declared that British would need to take on the responsibility of caring for British subjects who were of Asian origin. He gave British subjects a deadline of 3 months, that is 90 days, to leave, which meant November 8th, 1972. In August 9th, 1972, the policy was expanded to include citizens of India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. The population declined dramatically when Amin ordered the expulsion of all non-citizen Asians and later those who held Uganda's citizenship. Although the latter group's expulsion order was eventually rescinded, the majority still left the country. By the end of the year, only a small number of Asians remained in Uganda. Amin commended both the businesses and the personal goods of the expelled Asians community and distributed them to the remaining African population. For relatively short time, his actions were immensely popular with most Ugandans, but the country recovered slowly from the economic consequences of this. In the early 1990s, the Ugandan government formally invited the expelled Asian community to return to Uganda. Thousands did so, and some had their property returned to them.
We kicked out all these people and we came into government. We brought back, we gave back the properties of our Asian citizens and non-citizens that Idi Amin had taken. We gave them back. We had a hot debate in Parliament. Some people saying this, we said no, they must get back their properties.
How many Asians came to the UK in 1972, and what was the reaction here? Many of those who were expelled were citizens of the UK and colonies of almost 50,000 were British passport holders, and 27,200 chose to migrate to the United Kingdom. The British government ultimately permitted 27,000 to move to the UK through the Uganda Resettlement Board. There were objections to the arrival of the Ugandan Asians in the UK. The Leicester Council even took out newspaper advertising at the time warning them not to come to the city seeking jobs and homes, but their resettlement came to be reviewed as a success story for British migration in 1991. President Museveni invited the expelled community to return home to help to rebuild the economy of the country. On 18 September 1972, 193 refugees landed at 9:30 a.m. at Stansted Airport, the first of hundreds of the flight that would carry out the evacuation. Some families had made their own arrangement to accommodation, but others were taken off to an Arab camp in Suffolk in the UK. They were greeted by the Resettlement Board Chairman, Sir Charles Cunningham. How was Idi Amin overthrown? This is so interesting. Amin's rule in Uganda, which ended when he was overthrown in 1979, was one of the African country's most brutal periods. The Uganda-Tanzania War was fought between Uganda and Tanzania from October 1978 until June 1979 and led to the overthrow of Idi Amin Dada. Majority of immigrants from Uganda live in and around London. At that time of 2001 census, 11,000 Ugandan Asians were reported to be living in Leicester. Between 1968 and 1978, more than 20,000 displaced East African Asians settled in Leicester and now constitutes the domination subgroup in the Leicester Asian community. President Amin denounced the Ugandan Asian as a bloodsuckers and warned any remaining in the country after November 8, 1972, risked being imprisoned in military camps. In total, around 103,588 East African Asians entered British mainly from Uganda and Kenya. So you see the reason why former President Idi Amin Dada has to go do away with the Indians, Pakistanis, Bangladesh people in Uganda. The main reason, he considered them as bloodsuckers. They were corrupt. He considered them as rebellious. So this was like a coup to his government. So they were rebellious to his government, and they constituted almost 90% of Uganda's economy. So they were controlling Uganda's economy. This was very sad. This was very sad to Idi Amin Dada, and had to chase them away. That is all for today. Thank you so much for being part of this video. Kindly like, subscribe, and share. If you feel that this content is worth watching, please drop a comment and your experience according to the history, what you remember about Idi Amin Dada, and how can you compare Idi Amin Dada to President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. That is for today. Thank you so much. Have a blessed day, night, and thank you so much for being part of our family. May God bless you for God and my country.